Sairam, thank you all so much for joining us today for we'll be following the agenda as sent in the email. And just a gentle reminder to please be on mute throughout the session. We'll be starting off with 3 ohms.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Gananam Tvam Ganapati Gum Havamahe Kavim Kavinam Upamasravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmana Brahmanaspata Ana Srinvannotibhis Siddhasadhanam Prano Devi Saraswati Vaje Bhirvajinivati Dhinama Vitrayavatu Ganeshaya Namaha Saraswatyai Namaha Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om.
Sairam, now we'll be having a SSB presentation by Satya, our education coordinator. Over to you, Satya. Sairam.
Sairam, can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Sure, 1 second. Let me see if I can get to the first slide.
There, I
There
don't
you
know.
go. All
Got a
right.
message on there.
Sairam, everyone. Can you see my slide? All right. Sairam, everyone.
Yeah, we can.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Karthik.
Thank you.
Today, we are going to have a few slides to talk about what we are doing with the SSSC children and especially what we are doing for the Christmas activity. We have been working on the 5 human values as taught by Swami Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, Ahimsa, with the main focus of love being the central puzzle that puts us all together. We started out our Christmas activity by listening to a very short story of, more of an animation story of how Jesus was born and where all he traveled, how his mom and dad was trying to protect him. It's a very short story. You can see some of the children very actively listening. It's Bhavya, Lashya, Atharv, Advait, Sacharan, Sai Smaran, and Ishant was someone who presented. We also started doing a small group activity. For this year, we decided to do a Christmas ornament. Again, going back to reflecting the 5 human values, we decided to draw the 5 human values in a piece of paper in the form of a circle and put it into our Christmas tree to remind the children that we have to be thinking about that all the time. So Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, Ahimsa, the kids drew it in English and added it to their Christmas tree. More of their work, and one of them did a really good job of actually depicting the logo of SSSC. This is Sai Charan and Sai Smaran, and this is Bhavya. More work from the Christmas activity from the children. For a unique activity this time, in order to apply a love as our application, we thought of learning a new kind of prayer called as a 5-finger prayer. Using a bunny as a finger puppet, we taught the children how to do a different kind of prayer. The thumb here represents, which is closest to the heart, represents those who are close to you. So they have to pray for their family and friends. The pointer finger gives directions. So we have to pray for those who give directions, like our teachers, coaches, therapists, and doctors. The middle finger is the tallest. So we pray for all those leaders and governors who help us guide. The ring finger is kind of the weakest. So we pray for the sick and the poor. The pinky finger is the smallest. So at the end of our prayer, we spend some time praying for ourselves instead of beginning the prayer, praying for ourselves in front of Swami. This was a very valuable, very fun lesson as well for the children, and they kind of got it right away, understanding how to do the prayer. And almost for every single life application we did after this class, they were reflecting back to this one, which was very interesting. So our activity for this Christmas is to pray for everybody. Merry Christmas to you all. Thank you. Back to you, Karthik.
Sairam Satya, thank you so much for such a present.
Sairam.
Sairam, our Kansas Sci Center is blessed to have with us today brother Aaron and Cosby Powell on the auspicious occasion of Christmas. To give a brief introduction on them, brother Cosby Powell first heard of Satya Sai Baba in 1974, and then he read Man of Miracles in 1976. He wanted to go to India and see Swami, but his wife was pregnant with his son Aaron. When his son was born in 1977, a miracle happened that convinced Cosby of Swami's special nature, making him believe that he was divine. He waited until Aaron was 2 years old before going to see Swami, and he first saw Swami at Christmas 1979. He graduated from the University of Georgia School of Pharmacy in 1966, and he was a pharmacist for a few years, but he changed to real estate. Because of real estate, it gave him time to travel, so he would see Swami every 6 months. Over the years, he had many personal interactions with Swami, and he actually started videotaping Swami from 1981 to 1991. Brother Cosby started the Atlanta Sci Center in 1980 and served as its president for 4 years, and then became the regional president of Sci for several years. Next, Brother Aaron Powell was blessed to receive much attention from Swami from the age of 2. And the Satya Sai Center of Atlanta was founded in his family home. He grew up in the center. From a young age, he has been quite involved in spiritual pursuits. He had many trips to Prashanthi Noyam. He had multiple interviews with Swami and many experiences. Around the turn of the millennium, he began playing music, quickly writing songs and later bhajans. After a long visit to Prashanthi Noyam, he immersed himself in an intensive spiritual practice of constant meditation sessions that was all-consuming for months and led to profound spiritual experiences. He has a degree with distinction in philosophy, owns and operates multiple businesses in Atlanta involving real estate and art events, does a lot of service works, chants Rithram, and has served multiple times as an officer of the Atlanta Sci Center. He has recently done a wonderful project along with a team called Stories of His Glory, in which they embarked on a journey to gather the stories of transformative moments that members of the Atlanta Sci Center and folks in the surrounding community have had in relating to Sri Satya Sai Baba. In the series of video interviews, stories of personal interactions, remote experiences, healings, and miracles of over 95 devotees for the 95th birthday, and now 125 plus of these stories have been released on the Atlanta Center YouTube channel. He himself has been a devotee for over 40 years and considers his life as being dedicated to Sai. Now I'd like to virtually hand over the mic to Brother Cosby and Aaron Powell. Sairam.
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 Merry Christmas to all of you. We like to start our talks on Swami with a quote from Swami. Kind of a little treat, hopefully. We're going to start with a video quote, and I'm going to share screen with you now. Give me one moment. All faiths glorify the one and only God. All religions teach one basic discipline, the removal from the mind of the blemish of egoism, of running after little joys. Every religion teaches man to fill his being with the glory of God and evict the pettiness of conceit. It trains him in the methods of detachment and discrimination so that he may aim high and attain liberation. Believe that all hearts are motivated by the one and only God, that all faiths glorify the one and only God, that all names and all languages and all forms man can conceive denote the one and only God. His adoration is best done by means of love, Cultivate that attitude of oneness between men of all grades, all countries, and all continents. That is the message of love I bring. That is the message I wish you to take to heart. Foster love, live in love, spread love. That is the spiritual exercise which will yield the maximum benefit. When you recite the name of God, remembering the while His majesty, His compassion, His glory, His splendor, His presence, love will grow within you. Its roots will go deeper and deeper. Its branches will spread wider and wider, giving cool shelter to friend and foe, fellow national and foreigner. God has a million names. Sages and saints have seen Him in a million forms. They have seen Him with eyes closed and eyes open. They have extolled Him in all the languages and dialects of man, but yet His glory is not exhausted. Carry on the quest of your own reality. Select any name of His, any name that appeals to you. Select any form of His. Every day, when you awaken to the call of the brightening east, recite the name. Meditate on the form. Have the name and the form as your companion, guide, and guardian throughout the toils of the waking hours. When you retire for the night, offer grateful homage to God in that form with that name for being with you, by you, beside you, before you, behind you, all day long. If you stick to this discipline, you cannot falter or fail. Resolve to carry on the quest of your own reality. Resolve to live in the inspiration of the constant remembrance of God. Cultivate love and share love. I bless that you achieve success in this endeavor and derive great joy therefrom. These are the words of Bhagavan Sri Satya Sai Baba. Jai Sai Ram.
Yes. First, I'd like to thank Swami for this opportunity to share. Swami says he's not separate from his word. Swami says he's not separate from his words. And so that's the reason Aaron and I like to begin with Swami's words when we begin a talk, which invites him into the situation. Now, welcome to Christmas. According to Swami, Christmas is the Mass that is celebrated because of the birth of the Christ. He goes on to say that it should not be wasted in drinking, dancing, or other activities similar. Instead, it should be spent in prayer. And he goes on to say that prayer should be not just this day, but every day.
Sai Ram. So Merry Christmas to all of you. My father has forever been with Swami, and we've actually been mostly this life almost the same amount of time, although he definitely started it off and got us there. We wanted to tell you a little bit about who we are and some of our experiences with Swami, of course. But really, this is just about sharing a satsang with all of you on Christmas. It is a very holy day. It is a day that's also full of cheer throughout the countries in the West, and any Christian countries, I should say, and all over the world. And Swami has often verified the value of Jesus, the value of celebrating Christmas, and of course we've seen the festivities, which are quite unique actually, even in Prashanti, with people from all over the world celebrating Christmas. So we feel so fortunate to be with you all today. And we wanted to go into a couple of quick stories with us and Swami, just to give you some background on us and what we do. Currently, though, we both serve Swami by creating different video presentations of different kinds. We have there are a couple of different YouTube channels where we tend to serve Swami by producing some things there, and the one of them is called Sai for Everyone, which is the video you just saw. Was one of the presentations from that YouTube channel called Sai for Everyone. And my father has one by his name, Cosby Powell, where there are many of the footages that he shot of Swami, as well as many other interviews and different things. Do you have anything you wanted to add on that, Dad, also?
Yes, I had the great and good fortune to film Swami from 1981 to 1991, which was my last trip. And through the years, I've made several different videos, all of which are available at the ashram, but they are also accessible on the YouTube channel that Aaron mentioned. It's under Cosby Powell. And if you type Cosby Powell in the search bar, up will come some videos. And then if you click on Swami's picture under the title, it'll put you on my channel. And I've been recently putting together the older devotees' encounters and memories of Swami. And at the present time, I have 14 posted and intend to probably post about 180. Okay.
Yes. So a little bit about us. So there was in the intro, I think Kartik was the fellow who was doing the intros for us, and we wanted to thank you for that. And there's a speaking of an event. And so we'll go through that one quickly because that's one of the big events in our family and how we started to connect to Swami. So in 1977, a child was born in a house that would later become a Sai center. Now this house was on a park and it was a home birth, and the mother and the father had put a lot of time into arranging and being sure they had everything prepared for a home birth. And we won't go too long through the story, but there were some problems. It was about 10 and a half hours into the birth, and the midwife came to the father and said, you know, your wife is having some problems and she's getting very weak. She's been in labor a long time. She's actually getting to the point that she could even die from this if we're not careful. We need to take her to the hospital. And the man was not so inclined to do that. He thought, you know, geez, you know, we've put so much time into preparing to do this birth at home and not go to the hospital because the mother didn't want to be separated from the child at the time of birth, and she was very strong-willed. And anyway, he knew it wasn't her wish. So he said, hold on 1 second, to the midwife. And he went into the bathroom, and the man said,
Swami, this is a situation beyond my control. Will you please help?
Well, he came out of the bathroom and the child was born within 5 minutes. So the man had only contact with Swami at that time he'd been reading a book called Man of Miracles. And in that book, he used to read every Sunday the last chapter on the Avatar, and he'd begun to believe in this being called Sai Baba. And the question of who is Sai Baba was beginning to be answered. But everyone was very happy, but it was quite temporary and short-lived. Soon the midwife came to the man again and said, you know, we have another problem. And she can die from this too. And we're still going to have to take her to the hospital and the baby with us. We're all going to have to go. And the man said, hold on again. And he went back in the bathroom and the man said,
correction from before, I said Sai Baba. Again, I hate to be repetitious, but will you please help?
So the man comes out of the bathroom. The situation is well beyond his control, and he hears a knock on the door. He goes to the door, and he's a little bit preoccupied and perhaps even bothered that someone's knocking on the door, but he opens the door and there's a man standing there. And he says to the man,
what can I do for you?
And the man says, I'm a doctor. I heard you was a home birth going on here, and I just wanted to see what it was like. So the man's invited in, the doctor's invited in, he's able to solve everything, and the whole family is happy. Now, this happened in our family, of course. The man, of course, is my father. I'm the baby, so I'm the appropriate one to narrate this story naturally, because I don't remember any of it. But my mother and father have been so gracious that I should know it well enough to tell it now. And so a miracle at the time of my birth was part of what began to convince us of Swami's divinity and led us all to India 2 years later in 1979. And if you want to pick it up from there, Dad, can you tell me about that trip? That was Christmas 1979.
Yeah, we arrived maybe 10 days before Christmas. Swami was at Whitefield. And due to this experience Aaron just narrated, pretty convinced of Swami's divinity, even though I didn't know quite what that was. So I'm anxious to see him for the first time. And we are seated for darshan at Whitefield. And as you know, from his residence, he approaches to, at that time, under the tree, the Sairam tree. And so as Swami is coming from his residence, walking toward the tree, suddenly I see this brilliant light around him. I've never witnessed this since, but it was just like he was lit up like a Christmas tree. And from that, within myself, somehow, I knew he was divine. I knew he was God. I knew my search was over. I knew my life was about to really begin. Now, I think Aaron wanted me to tell you a story subsequent to this. And we went through the 79 trip, which went into 1980, a couple of weeks. And then we came back, and I was so anxious to go see Swami. So I went again to see Swami 6 months later with Aaron, and that's another story, but we'll go into that at another time. And then came home, and 6 months later, I'm going for the third time to see Swami. Now, back then, there weren't as many people as they started to gather from there. And so interviews were often, anyone really from the West usually got an interview. However, those two trips, we didn't get an interview, weren't invited in by Swami. And so I was anxious really to have an interview because everybody else had them, and I wanted to be in that setting, even though Swami did interact in the darshan lines. Now, this brings to the third trip, which is when this story happened. So the third trip, I'm really wanting an interview with Swami. And, he's at Prashanti when I arrive, and then later he moves to Whitefield again. And this is where this particular story started. I guess we had about 2 more darshans after this one. No, we had about 4 darshans. Anyway, what Swami started doing was, as he was approaching to where I was seated, and back then you could get on the first row pretty easy. All you had to do was arrive early. So I'm seated on the first row, anxious to see as much of Swami as I can. And Swami's coming down the darshan line, and he gets to within about 5 people of me. And then he just walks out up the darshan line and makes a circle around me and comes back in about 3 or 4 people on the other side of me. And I thought, well, this is interesting. Must be someone that he's avoiding. Well, the next darshan, same things happen, and I was seated in a different place. And this time I'm thinking, well, I guess this is applicable to me. And I don't know what is going on. I can't understand why this is happening. The next darshan, the same thing. Well, I'm becoming very dejected. I'm actually increased my meditations, my prayers, thinking about Swami. hoping that somehow this is not going to continue because I have to go back to the United States in a day or two. So the next darshan, same thing. Well, you know, people notice what's going on with Swami. And so what was happening was after about the third time Swami did this, people wouldn't sit next to me or they wouldn't line up next to me. The only people that would come sit close to me were people that came in late. Well, then about the fifth time, or sixth time that this was going to happen, Swami comes over and invites the person on my right in for an interview and invites the person on my left in for an interview, ignoring me. And of course, now I am really well aware that this is being directed toward me, even though I can't make heads or tails of it. I don't know what is going on. So it proceeds to the next to the last darshan. And I'm really distressed because this is the way I have to go back to the United States. And I know at this point, an interview is definitely out of the question. So Swami comes, and as he's coming down the darshan line, I'm praying to him mentally. I'm saying, Swami, I can't go back to the United States like this. Please, relent. Let me understand what's going on. Just look at me. Maybe that'll be enough. Just look at me. So Swami comes toward me, and I'm sort of hoping, since he's just almost like a normal darshan, that he will look at me. I'm on the front row. And so Swami comes right next to me and he looks down, and then he goes on by. Well, this is sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm just, I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't really much have a reason for living. I'm very dejected, distressed. Now Swami proceeds down the darshan line, and I'm, really just beside myself. I'm not understanding what happens. And then all of a sudden, into my mind, like a bell ringing in silence, these words came. I looked into your heart, and I was not there. Then I understood. I had an intellectual relationship with God, with Swami. It wasn't heart to heart, because I'd always been a very mental person. So that night, I only slept maybe an hour, dozed, and the rest of the time I was just visualizing Swami in my heart. And so the next day, Swami walks right over to me and blesses me. And into my mind came, but not like the other. It says, now you have the right idea. Go home and work on it.
And thanks for sharing that, first of all, but it reminds me very much of the way Jesus talked about opening your heart and not your mind. And, as we go through today, we're going to start to draw some parallels between Swami and Jesus and the teachings and what we can learn on this day of Christmas. But the reason I asked my dad to share that story was it's poignant to all of us in the most clear way that unless we have Swami's words written on our heart, unless we have his teachings in our hearts and not just in our minds, we don't really have him in our hearts. We have him in our minds. And that's an important distinction. And that's something that Jesus said also, those thousands of years ago. The Lord wants the law to be written on your heart. And obviously, Swami's vouched many times for Jesus. And I'm going to share a screen with you, and we're going to jump into one of Swami's discourses about Jesus, which will further the rest of the talk. Sayonara. This is from my father's film, A Message of
Jesus
Love.
was a master born with a purpose, the mission of restoring love, charity, and compassion into the hearts of man. He had no attachment to the self. He never paid heed to sorrow, pain, joy, or gain. He had a heart that responded to the call of anguish, the cry for peace and brotherhood. He went about the land preaching the lesson of love and poured out his life as a libation and sacrifice to humanity. Jesus was the name he was known by. He was honored by the populace as Christ, for they found in his thoughts, words, and deeds no trace of ego. He had no envy or hatred. He was full of love, charity, humility, and sympathy. Jesus came as the embodiment of love and compassion and lived among men, holding forth the highest ideals of life. You must pay attention to the lessons he elaborated in the various stages of his life. I am the messenger of God, he declared. Yes, each individual has to accept that role and live as examples of divine love and charity. Jesus wandered in lonely places for 12 years, engaging himself in study, spiritual exercises, and meditation on God. Jesus spent 5 years in the Himalayas, realizing he was the Christ when he was 25. He traveled in India, Persia, Tibet, Egypt, and other countries. He searched for the divine in the objective world of nature, but he soon realized that nature is a kaleidoscopic picture created by one's own imagination, and sought God within himself. Here in India, his stay in the Himalaya monasteries in Kashmir brought him greater success. From the attitude of being a messenger of God, he declared that he was the Son of God. For the old attitude meant duality, a master-servant relationship. One could not then move beyond the orders of the master. One had to carry out the duties laid down in the scriptures. This he found irksome, for he felt that he was the image, while God was the original. This bond of relationship increased. With heart consciousness in the ascendant, you feel nearness and dearness, and so the father-son bond seems natural at this stage. Later, as this consciousness stabilized, Jesus declared, I and my Father are one.
I did a lot of research to put that narrative together. I went back, I produced this film in 1987 and gave Swami a copy of it in 1988. But I did a lot of research, and I went back through Swami's discourses for many, many years and pulled out excerpts from those discourses that related to Jesus and put that narrative together. So there was some time involved, but one of the main points in that narrative is Jesus searched for the divine in the objective world of nature, but he soon realized that nature is a kaleidoscopic picture created by one's own imagination and sought God within himself. Well, see, that's the message. We need to internalize our search. Yes, participate in the outward activity in sadhana, but the real truth is within. And Jesus once declared this: the kingdom of heaven is within.
And there's a lot of similarity between Jesus and Swami. And one of the things that I find really valuable and really easy for us to celebrate Christmas and in Christ is that their teachings are often very much the same. Much of what Jesus taught is right down the line of love all, serve all. We had some examples. But do you remember a story about Jesus and Dad that might exemplify?
Yeah, I'm going to incorporate Swami because in essence, Swami is not separate from Jesus as he is displayed or exemplified in many ways. And I'm going to make a narrative out of it, and it goes like this. I was once in an interview, and well, I had lots of interviews. I was very fortunate, and I was just in an interview, and Swami said, "We're going to do some spiritual math." And I'm thinking to myself, because I'd had lots of experiences with him, I'm going, well, whatever question that comes out of this, you can't get it right, so just remain silent.
Mm-hmm.
And so Swami said, "What is 1 and 1?" And so I remained silent, but a number of people who didn't know the exercise started answering 1 and 1 is us, 1 and 1 is one, Swami. And a couple other, spiritual answers. And Swami said, no. He said, 1 and 1 is we. We and we are one. And so that brings me to Jesus. And Jesus once asked one of his, not disciples, but one of his followers, Nicodemus, he said, "What is the greatest commandment?" And Nicodemus replied, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, and soul. This is the greatest commandment." And Jesus looked at him and said, "Well spoken. You're not far from the kingdom of heaven. But I give you another commandment, no less great. Thou shalt love thy brother as thyself." So to me, the message is the same in both instances.
Yeah, the love all aspect of both the quest for divinity and the love all aspect of the teachings of both Jesus and Swami kind of pervade everything that we see about them and everything that we can learn from. And there's a lot to learn from Jesus as well. And I remember there was a story of when he was traveling, and there was a man came to him on the road, and he was a rich man and he was wealthy. And he said, "Good master, what can I do to achieve eternal life?" Which seems like a big question. Of course, he seems like a wealthy man, probably has everything else he needs, but wants to live forever. And Jesus said, "Go and sell all that you have and give it to the poor, and you shall have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me." And the man questions, "What do you mean? Sell everything that my father slaved for, everything that we've ever worked to have?" And Jesus said, "Yes. Sell everything. You cannot serve two masters, God and money." And very much the same way, the commitment to Swami, although he allows us to live much more simply than this. I think in this case, Jesus was giving the example to the man because that was exactly what he needed, because he was attached to money and he was worshiping money. But we can't worship anything except for the Lord in life. And we can't be overly attached to anything except for the Lord. And each of us, if we were to confront Swami or Jesus or the masters, they would likely tell us the thing that we were most attached to. We're really on the path. And it ends up love all and serve all at the end of the day. Serve everyone, love everyone, give everything away. And these are some of the things we learned profoundly from the life of Jesus. Were there any other things that you remember, Dad? From my father grew up as a Christian. Of course, I grew up, as you know, from this original story in this talk, dedicated and loving Swami my whole life. But growing up in this culture, I do know a lot about Christianity also. But go ahead. My father did grow up a Christian and may have some more insights for us also.
Yeah, we were going to show Jesus of Nazareth right after this, I think. And I just will go to the core belief of a Christian, and that is that Jesus is the Savior. Now, pretty much that belief system revolves around one quote from the Bible. And the quote goes, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one may enter into the Father but by me." Now, that seems pretty open and shut, but we have to realize that that is somewhat limited in that it's the viewpoint of the physical Jesus. But if you look at it from the Christ consciousness, the consciousness of Jesus, which he achieved, as was explained by Swami, from internalizing God and realizing that he was one with God, then it makes more sense. And the I am consciousness has been around in the New Testament forever, for 2,000 years before this statement was made. So to me, it's the I am consciousness that Jesus is referring to. And Aaron has a little bit of a different take on it. And then I think he's going to show you a film.
Yeah, the other take that I have is just that it's along the same line. But if I'm talking to a Christian, oftentimes the dividing point is that very quote. Christians will say, Jesus said this, and therefore I don't believe in any Satya Sai Baba, any Hinduism, Buddhism, any other religions, anything. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Well, the key here, and perhaps some ground can be made by making it aware, is Jesus the physical name and body? And Jesus is much more than the physical name and body, the name and form. And when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, he's talking about what he really is. He's not talking about the temporary things, the physical name and the body. So when we say, I am the way, the truth, and the life, it is the I am. It's the essence. It's the essence of Jesus is the way. The essence of what he was is the indicator. The way, the truth, the life. The things that we have to do are to become like Jesus, to become like a master. Not in the physical sense, not in the mental sense per se, not the name and form, but the essence, the spirit. To some degree, I guess you can incorporate the mental aspect. And with Swami even, it becomes very interesting when we discuss whether he even has a mind. But we'll leave that discussion aside for today. But what we can learn from Jesus, and we can take great inspiration, is the way he lived and what he taught. And on Christmas, Swami has said it is imperative, I'm paraphrasing, but he said that we absolutely must study the lives of the saints, of Jesus, of those masters that have come. And that is the appropriate way to spend the time in prayer and study of the masters on those days. And so today on Christmas, we're going to share an attempt to capture some of what Jesus was teaching also from a film called Jesus of Nazareth. So let me try to share that with you all now.
Your son will be teaching in the temple.
You know, a huge testimony for the Jewish people, and it's fairly well
Sorry,
known
we have an ad here.
that
We'll skip that.
Oh, shall I take you to him?
No. I'll wait. I'll see him when it is time.
Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. For I tell you, many kings and prophets have desired to see what you see and have not seen it, to hear what you hear and have not heard it. I thank you, Father, for hiding these things from the learned and the wise and revealing them to the innocent, and the simple. For he who would be great among you must be your servant. He who would be the first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Come, O blessed of my Father, and inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was a prisoner, and you visited me. I was sick, and you came to me. You will ask, when did we do this for you? Whoever does this to the least of my brethren, he does it to me.
I remember Jesus of Nazareth, this film that touched me very much, but to me it had a lot of extra things in it. And so I made a copy of it myself back when you had tapes. And I only include the teachings of Jesus, which I would go over periodically. And by going over these constantly, you really get a sense of who Jesus was and what he really taught when you take out everything else. Now, Aaron's going to talk to you a little bit about service, and then I have a quote, unless Aaron wants me to do the quote first.
Go ahead and do the quote. It's fine. Well, before you do, one thing that I find strikingly similar is just a lot of what we hear from Jesus. It's almost as if Swami is speaking. In many cases, even the discussion, whatever you do to anyone, you're doing it to Swami, you're doing it to God, you're doing it to Jesus. Shirdi Sai said the same thing. And so these teachings echo through the ages out of the voices of the masters. And all the more reason for us to pay attention as they come from all these sources. Of course, for us, it's all Swami, but the power of these words are always so relevant. Anyway, go ahead and one of the things he mentioned, of course, was the least among you must be, those among you who would be chosen must be servants, and the first among you must be a slave. So this constant serve all message is so heavy there in Jesus' teachings. Anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about service, which we like to do with every talk that we do. Go ahead, if you would, add with your quote.
Okay. Swami says, Sai seeks only one thing, that you should love your fellow man and serve society. Sacrifice your selfishness. Try to come to understand who you truly are. If you really want to understand who you truly are, plunge into service. Serving man is serving God. Service is the primary means through which the heart is purified. It broadens your vision, widens your awareness, deepens your compassion. Love is born in the womb of service. Love finds expression in service. Love grows through service. And God is love. Pretty much spells it right out, that through service, we form an identity with God, the God within. And Aaron had some comments on some service and service projects he did in and around Atlanta.
Yeah, and generally adapting service as a way of life is certainly something that I think it behooves all side devotees to take up. And if you haven't already, there's a wonderful wealth of experience of yourself. And if you do it the right way, if you can do it in a selfless way, if you can find things that you can do in your community, and most of the Sai centers provide these opportunities, it really can help with the growth. And that's Swami's constantly teaching that. One of the things I wanted to bring up, we do a clinic in Atlanta. We have in the past. I was instrumental in getting some of that set up. But we ended up partnering, not so much officially, but in an unofficial way, with a clinic that was set up by a church as well. So we did our own at a shelter, but we would also participate in this one done by a church. And what I've been finding is that people that really, really are invested in service, they move toward this message, this sense that is such a holy thing that basically transcends the different types, the names and forms of the different masters. And there's a synthesis and a unity on the high levels of service, the people that are really, really committed, because they are practicing this love all, serve all in their lives. They're integrating that into themselves. And you feel that common holiness in them. Many of them have not been exposed to Satya Sai Baba or his teachings. And even if they were, they may already be attached to another name and form, in some cases Jesus or other things. But you can see that they're truly devotees of the Lord. And we see these people coming together through service. It's a wonderful bridge. And we always like to mention a little bit about it. But this Grace Village Clinic, they're put on by a Christian church, and they never charge anyone. And they do everything to provide them the medications and the lab tests and everything. And over time, it's grown into such a tremendous program. And our doctors from the Sai Center have taken part in it. And it's been something that has been an inspiration and inspires many. And that inspiration continues to grow. So constantly, I would advise us all to keep looking at opportunities for service. I know COVID has caused a lot of issues with that. But whether you're hands-on or whether you're a little bit removed from it, keep service as part of your life. It's something all the masters keep teaching us, and something that we always like to emphasize in our talks as well.
Aaron, let me interrupt you. While I was serving as president of the Atlanta Center, after the third trip, the fourth, fifth, and sixth, I started getting lots of interviews with Swami. So it's toward the mid-'80s, and I really didn't have anything to ask of Swami. I needed a Swami, and I was in an interview once, and I thought of the Atlanta Center because, we want to share Swami's love. And I asked Swami when it became my turn in the interview, I said, Swami, would you give a message to the Atlanta Center? And he said, yes. And very emphatically, he said, tell them to do more service. Well, of course, I did relay this message, and we instigated a number of new service projects when I got back as a result. A few years later, I was a regional president of the Southeast region for the Sai organization. And again, I was in an interview, and again, I had time, and I asked Swami this time, I said, Swami, do you have a message for the Southeast region? And he said, yes. And again, almost a repetition of the previous thing. He said, tell them to do more service, which I came back, and of course, we tried to implement many more service projects in the Southeast. I just wanted to comment on that. Swami, you could have said anything as a message, but he always sent service back as the message.
Yeah, it's crucial and important to remember these things. And it always made a big impact on me when you would tell that story, that was the thing. And that's what Swami said so many times. So anyway, we know you've heard the message before about service, but it bears repeating. And hopefully we're drawing inspiration from Sai and from Jesus today on Christmas about that. And anyway, that's a lot of what we were going to share about Jesus specifically related to Christmas. But I thought we might also share a couple more fun Swami stories before we go. I know everyone always enjoys hearing each other's stories. And one of the great things on a holy day is to share the stories of the glory of the Lord, which is something, of course, that is close to my heart. But my father has certainly had a lot of opportunities with Swami. Were there any quick stories that come to mind for you?
Oh, yeah.
You might share.
Oh, yeah.
Just for fun.
Yeah, we'll make them short and sweet, even though you could dress them up and make them more in detail. But one thing that always struck me, I evolved to where I was almost serving Swami as a Seva doll on trips. I was invited to follow his car, and noticed a couple of very compassionate things that really touched my heart. Now, previous to that, though, I was at Whitefield once, and I wasn't filming this particular day. There's a wall that separates the road from the ashram complex, the complex there at Whitefield. And there was a guy standing on that wall. And all I can say is he was dirty. He had dirt all over him. He had dirt, he had a sort of a turban around his head, and it was dirty. Everything was soot. And you could tell that he'd probably been walking along the road from a long distance, but there was a need or he wouldn't be there. So he's standing against that wall, and Swami comes out giving darshan, and he sees this man against the wall, and he walks over to the man and puts his hand on him. Now he's putting his hand on a dirty shoulder, and then he whispers something in the guy's ear, and the guy drops down and he takes Pad Namaskar and leaves. But it reminded me very much like a story in the Bible where Jesus was approached by a Roman soldier saying, "My servant is ill, will you heal him?" And Jesus said, "Yes, I come." And he said, "There's no need for you to come. You can just give the word and it will be done." And so it's similar to me again with Jesus, how he would have acted. But it was evident that whatever it was that needed to be done, it was done in that instance. And it just touched my heart that Swami would be so compassionate. Another instance quickly.
Quick question for you. Quick question.
I'm sorry.
Quick question for you. So,
yes.
In a previous time, I might have this confused and mixed in with another story, but I think you had mentioned that somehow you came to find out that what Swami said to the man was, "You can go home, your son is okay now," or something.
No, it's a different situation, but you could tell that that's what happened.
Something along those lines. Is the
Right.
man had been traveling some distance and
yeah.
Swami. Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. But the other, not that I didn't witness a lot of compassionate things with Swami, because once you start serving him, you just sort of a witness. You're no longer allowed to go, try to touch his feet or get him a note or whatever. You just serve whatever's going on at the situation. Well, back in '88, Swami had invited me to follow his car from Kodaikanal to Uti. And it was myself, Burgess, another photographer, and a Swami's driver and himself. Radha Krishna was Swami's driver. And so our instructions were, if we weren't needed for crowd control, we could film. So we stopped at a number of venues, which I filmed because there were Seva dolls in place to take care of the crowd control. So that didn't apply to us there. But after a few venues, we went into this village, which is somewhere between Kodaikanal and Uti. I do not know because we were just following. And we pull up to this house, and it's evident, a home visit. And so Swami gets out, and of course we quickly get out and follow him to this house. Well, there's a distance between where the cars are parked and the house. And we go in, and I actually filmed that, which you can find on my channel. Anyway, it comes time for us to leave. Now, there's no one in sight when we go in this house. There are bhajans being sung in the house, and we get in, and it's evidently family and a close friend. So when we leave, we go to leave, we come out, and there's this mass of humanity. I mean, these are villagers. They're, dressed as villagers. And probably this is the only chance they're ever going to get to see Swami. Well, we're stationed to get Swami to his car, which is across this yard. Well, Swami doesn't do that. Swami meanders through that crowd and slowly either touches or everyone in that crowd touched him. And when you witness this, Swami's compassionate nature, it just makes you want to be a better person.
That's great stories. And while I have some other stories, how are we doing on time?
Time-wise, we're doing fine. You can go up till 8:30 Central, which is 9:30 p.m. your time.
Okay, so if we're still okay on time, I'll tell us a story as well. Now, I've been prompted to share a story just now, which I've never shared publicly. And it involves my mother. So in '98, I went on a trip that was a big momentous trip for this life and understanding who Swami was. Of course, at that time I was 20 years old, and a lot of things happened on that trip. I ended up having 3 interviews with Swami and a lot of attention, but what I'm going to share today, I've never shared before. On that trip, there was a lady with us. I won't give any names, but she was with our group. And she immediately on arriving had maybe 2 darshans and then got sick, as many Westerners, whatever, are not acclimatized to these particular bugs that are over there in India, and it can happen vice versa when people come over here too. But she immediately had, a totally debilitating case of dysentery and was stuck in the room. And she only had 1 week there. She didn't have a lot of money, the lady, and had really saved up and spent money that she barely had to come to see Swami. And it kept going. As many are familiar, this can last quite a few days to get well from these things, and people have all kinds of troubles. And it was getting where she only had maybe 2 days left after that. And I was there with my mother. Now, all this time, my mother had never had an interview with Swami. She had been, for almost 20 years, been serving Swami's devotees, helping to build the Atlanta Center, and was very much a mother to the members of the center, just as much as she was a mother to me and my brother, and later my sister. And she had this way of serving whoever was in front of her, and always looking for opportunities to do service. And her field of service was literally whoever was in front of her. Well, this lady, my mother has a very soft heart, and she saw what this lady was going through. And she couldn't bear the idea that she was going to have to go home without getting any real darshans of Swami after having spent the money and so forth. So believe it or not, I heard her tell this lady, she said, "I'm going to take on your sickness so that you can have some darshans of Swami before you go." And I never asked my mother what she did. I don't know if she prayed to Swami and asked him to take the sickness and transfer it from the lady, or if she just willed it, or what happened. But that night my mother got sick, and this lady got better. And in the morning the lady was fine, and my mother was stuck on the bed. And this lady got to go to darshans. for her last couple of days before she had to leave, and got to have some darshans of Swami. And I never spoken of this, but I saw this in front of my eyes. And my mother's passed away now, so I can't go and ask her how she did that. And I really don't know. I think she prayed to Swami, and Swami allowed for that. But it was an example of service like I've never seen. And later in that trip, when we got close to the end, my mother was to leave, and I had taken one quick story. I wanted to stay with Swami. I realized who he was on this trip, in a full sense of being an adult and realizing that you're with God. And I had taken and written, I had started to communicate with him with letters, which many people have, but I had written 2 letters to him because I was supposed to go back and go to school. And I wanted to see if I could get his permission to stay. But the method I chose to do that is I wrote 2 letters. One letter spelled out all the reasons I should go back to school and leave on the allotted time of the trip and go back and fulfill my studies because it's my duty. I'm a young man, so forth and so on. And I know Swami's big on education. And then the other letter was all the reasons that I should skip school and stay with Swami. Because the avatar of the age, you have a chance as a young person to be there with the Lord. So I took both letters and I held them up in one hand in darshan. And at the end of each letter, it said, "You're only to take this letter, Swami, if I'm to go to school." And then the other letter says, "Swami, you're only to take this letter if I'm to stay with you." I put both the letters in one hand and I held it up in darshan, knowing if he's omniscient, he's only going to take one of the 2 letters, even though they're held up in one hand. And I thought maybe he would scan each one and, use his omniscience and figure out and take one of them. But as it turns out, he came along in darshan, and I think he made it a point not to look at me, not to look at, and just look off in the distance, and his hand slid over the one letter to go and didn't take it, and then only took the letter to stay. So I ended up, planning to stay for much longer as a result of this wonderful experience with Swami. And then, my mother was still scheduled to leave. She had a lot of duties. So she was to leave. And this was a little while after this letter, maybe 3 or 4 days later. And she had maybe 1 or 2 darshans left. Now, she had never had an interview. She, like I said, been a mother to the center and done so much work for Swami. So I wrote another letter to Swami. And in this letter, I said, all the reasons you're going to have to give my mother an interview, Swami. You don't have to. Here she's done all this work for you. She's been such a devotee of yours for all these years. Please give her an interview. And she only had 2 darshans left. Now, I only got the 4th row for that. When I had written that letter, I got the 4th row. So I was just out of letter giving range. My rule was row 3 was the furthest row you could offer a letter from without disrupting people. And I was very much against all that. But what I did feel like you could do is hold the letter up. So certainly when Swami came around, the letter is essentially asking for an interview, and I hold the letter just like so. I don't reach it out to block anyone's view or anything. And Swami looks at and he motions with his hand like this, for the letter. So then I feel emboldened to step over everyone. So then I step over everyone and reach the letter out to hand it to him. And as I hand it to him, I say, "Interview, Swami." Well, this is taking a little bit of time. And my mother's over there on the other side watching all of this going on. And I think I had tipped her off that I was going to try to get an interview for her. And at this point, by the way, I had not had an interview either as an adult, or, I did not have any memory of an interview, nor did anyone in our group. Swami looked at the letter and he looked up like he was calculating. He said, "How many?" I said, 5. And he looked up like he was calculating and he said, "Go." So I specifically remember how much love was pouring out from the devotees around us as we went down to gather our things, and they were patting us on the back, and there was so much love from others wishing you well, wishing you this great opportunity to interact with Swami. And that was my first interview. That was the first interview of my mother. That was the first interview of everyone in our group, all 5 of us. And I went up to the veranda and I sat there. And you've never seen a happier mother in the history of the world than my mother was, walking from the other side and looking. And until this very day, it never connected to me. Not only had she done all this service for these devotees all these years, but that act of service of taking on another's illness in that way. All these things, Swami knows all the things that are going on, not just in Puttaparthi, but also around the world. But anyway, we had 2 interviews with Swami in her last 2 days. He made her diamond earrings, and she flew away so happy. And I later had another interview later in that trip, and he said, "Where is your mother?" And I almost slipped and said, "Yeah, my mother's, but no, you're my mother, Swami." And then he was like, she flew away so happy. He didn't say so happy. He just said she flew away, but he had this contented look on his face. And it was only later that I came and spoke to my mother about that. And that was also one of the happiest times of her life. After all these years, I'd had an interview with Swami. He had made her diamond earrings. She had left her son at the feet of the Lord, and she was flying home so happy. So Swami is very much a part, and this is a dramatic story in ways, but he's very much a part of all of our families. And even things we don't know about our family members, he knows. And he's connected to all of us, and he's working through our families in such ways. And it's such a blessing for all of us to know Sai. And I guarantee you, each and every one of you, he's thoroughly involved in all the affairs of your family and aware of everything that's going on with them. And I don't know why I was prompted to share that. That just came to me. But that was a little story about my mother as well. On this day of family, this in the West, particularly this Christmas day, a day to share amongst family. And you're all our family. You're all Sai family. So we're so happy to be here with you today. And were there any other stories you wanted to share, Dad? We still have a little bit of time.
How much time do we have?
Maybe 10 minutes. You could do a story in 10 minutes.
You're going to do a video, right?
We have one video at the end that's another 3 or 4 minutes or something like that.
Okay.
You have time if you want to share any other stories come to you.
Well, in a way, that was what we had allocated for me.
Okay.
There's a comment that I would like to, a quote that I would like to end my part with.
Sure.
And do you know what the secret to human birth is?
Only because
I know you
told
do.
me.
I know you do. But maybe some of the others don't know what Swami said in a quote one time. And I'm taking this from a larger, taking it out of a larger quote, but Swami said, and this just sums it up for me, is as a human being, you should desire, seek, and enjoy only one thing, and that is love of God. Once you have love of God, you will never indulge in bad actions. This is the secret of human birth.
That's a wonderful thing to end on. All of you, we plan to give you about an hour of hopefully things that have been valuable to you on this Christmas day, and something that makes us all feel like we're sharing together. If anyone had anything they needed or had an immediate question, feel free, or if not, we will proceed with a video just to remind us all the opportunity that we have with Swami. And this is from the Sai for Everyone channel. But go ahead.
Sairam, so we'd like to open up the floor for some question and answer before the video.
Sure.
Sairam, does anyone have any questions?
And there's no pressure if there's no questions.
I guess I got one question.
Sure.
You're probably one of the few Sai devotees that I know that were born in a Sai family. So, like as a child, what was your experience of Swami being in your life? Like when you were going to school and like at the center as a you're from usually it's, a lot of people are of I'm just trying to think of the best way to ask it, but like how did you connect to Swami as a child? Was it mainly through center piece or based on your parents telling about Swami's teachings?
So I remember distinctly a couple of things I can share. Thank you for the question. It's a very good question. And I'll try to hit three things quickly. Three things immediately came to me. One of them, I seem to have a lot of faith in Swami from a young age, and perhaps that's because I was very, very fortunate in that my father was constantly telling Swami stories, and to this day, that's his favorite thing in the world to do, is to share Swami stories with anyone and everyone that has them. And he used to share so many when I was a child. So I remember in a Balvikas class, growing up with that, the question was posed, who is Swami? And all these kids are having different answers, and that's okay. But I was quite surprised. Some were saying, oh, he's my friend, he's whatever and whatever. And for me, the answer was obvious that he's God. Like I just didn't have any question about his divinity, even from the age of a child. However, what I will say is that wasn't always something that fit in with my classmates in school, and went to public school for much of life, although I did go to private school for younger ages. And I wouldn't necessarily talk about Swami specifically. There's no need to proselytize unless you feel like you have a receptive ear. But I remember a couple of things that happened during my school days that also helped to reinforce my faith, and they're quick stories, kind of fun. So one time I was at a kid's birthday party, and the birthday party was at a bowling alley. And all the kids are trying to roll strikes, but as a kid, it's very difficult to roll a strike in bowling when you're young. I'm talking about like 10 years old or so, maybe 11. And you're really not very proficient to roll strikes, and very few kids can do it, and mostly they'll hit one pin or have a lot of gutters or whatever. And anyway, everyone get very excited whenever there was a strike. Well, I don't know what prompted me to do this, but I was wanting to roll a strike too. And I went back and I closed my eyes and I started doing Sai Ram. I just went Om Sai Ram, Om Sai Ram, Om Sai Ram, Om Sai Ram. Well, I grabbed the bowling ball, I went up and rolled the ball, and it was a strike. And then I went back and I closed my eyes again and I started doing Om Sai Ram, Om Sai Ram, Om Sai Ram, Om Sai Ram. Went up and rolled the strike again. And all the kids are going, what's going on? And I went back and closed my eyes, Om Sai Ram, Om Sai Ram, Om Sai Ram, Om Sai Ram. Connecting to Swami, I went up and rolled a third strike. And everyone's just losing their minds, like what's going on? But for me, it was also a miraculous thing. And miracles, it doesn't matter if they're saving a life or whatever, it's the impact on you that ends up being the important aspect of it, and making you believe and connect with God and understand who Swami is. So even from a young age, that was one experience that I had. And what I would say about all of it as a total, in sum total of the question, is the important thing is to realize, and for the child too, to establish a relationship with the divine that's internal and connected for them. And that's going to have to be tested and reinforced, most likely in many ways, as they go through their teenage years and adult years, as they move into different types of awareness. But the sooner they can have some form of experience with the divine, I think that's really helpful. The more they can hear the stories, the more they can have some basis to draw on. I think that is also very helpful. And so for me, growing up with those things, it's made it much smoother in this life. I say smoother, not that there haven't been times when Swami forced me to dig deeper and find out what my true belief was in him and in God and things of that nature. And you will be tested in those ways as well when and if it's relevant, so that you can establish more and more deeply your relationship with the divine. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much, brother. Then, one thing is that when I was reading your introduction, you also composed some bhajans. Could you sing one of them?
Unfortunately, no. I would certainly do so, and I had planned to do a number of things along those lines. However, Swami seems to have given enough congestion that we can't sing appropriately for that I would consider appropriate for him. But perhaps in a future session, I'd be happy to share some of those bhajans that have been sung. But by the way, it's a great question. It's just it doesn't seem to be in the cards for tonight. So, sorry, Ron, but thank you.
No worries. Does anyone else have any quick questions?
Hi, Ram. This is Satya. I have one small question. Can you please share the name of that YouTube channel that you mentioned when you started the presentation?
Yes, the YouTube channel, Satya, is called Sai for Everyone. And that's SAIFOR, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, there's some interviews with some devotees there. There's some words of Satya Sai Baba, which is what we will close with, just as we opened with Swami's words, we'll close with some. And then there's some snippets from films with beautiful singing that's going on from different folks that there was, and throughout the years of my father's films, mostly is what we have so far. So those are some of the contents.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's see, any other questions?
Okay. Would you like to give any closing remarks, Dad, other than that?
The Swami quote was really my closing remark because I like to close with Swami. And you're going to do likewise here with this. I think that'll fill the hour up.
Yes, it should. Any last things from your side, guys? Okay.
It was really a pleasure listening to your stories, especially for someone growing up here. We always find it very hard to connect to the children who are growing up here. They didn't have a chance to see Swami. It's very hard to tell them who Swami is. They can only imagine Swami's his face with so much hair in his head. Rather than that, they can relate very well. But it's really nice to hear some of the stories of someone who has grown up here in the US and have that some closure memories of Swami. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, sure. So happy to be with you all. And one suggestion for the kids, I think that, going through whether it's the 95 stories, which is on the Atlanta Sai Center website, or on there's so many other stories out there now from so many media places, and trying to put together some stories that you think the children will relate to, and little by little helping them to understand that there's so many different people that have had great experiences with Swami. I know that will help them to piece some of this together. But Swami, in the end, it has to be a connection between Swami and them. And we're only there to help facilitate that as an option for their soul and for Swami to carry forward. So never any pressure from our side, only we do the best we can and serve them with as much love as we can.
I'm mentioning the 95 stories. Within those stories are a lot of children talking about their relationship with Swami. If you would go through there and show them some of that, I think they can relate to that also.
Absolutely. I will definitely go through them and use them for some of the SSSC classes. Thank you so much for that wonderful suggestion.
Sairam. Thank you, sister, for being part of our satsang.
Sairam.
Okay. So we'll pull up, these are Swami's words. We always like to begin and end with Swami's words. May he bless all of you on this Christmas day. May you all have a Merry Christmas, the rest of it. May your families all be blessed. And may we all take some lessons from Master Jesus into our lives, much as we take the lessons of Swami, and they're very much the same. And use this day as another opportunity to take those steps forward. It reminds me of that bhajan, Swami, take my hand, Jesus, take my hand. If I could sing a little better today, we would jump into that one right now. but those of you that know the bhajan, it's very sweet. Merry Christmas to all of you. And let's all remember the avatar did come for us in this life, and it's a very rare opportunity that we have. So we've heard it so many times, but we'll close with his words on something to do with that opportunity on this Christmas day. Saram to all of you again.
Saram.
This is the Sai for Everyone logo, and these are Swami's words.
The airplane has to land at a certain place in order to take in those who have reserved the right to fly by the tickets that they have purchased. So too, the Lord has to come down so that those who have won the right to be liberated may be saved. Incidentally, others too will know of the Lord, of His grace and ways of winning it, and of the joy of liberation. There are some who deny even today the possibility of air travel. They curse the contrivance. They cavil at it. Similarly, there are many who cavil at the avatar that has come to save them. Human lives are now passing on and on, filth over filth, bent, broken, diseased, distressed, and disheartened. To enrich their lives and make human heritage worthwhile, I have come. I am evincing all this enthusiasm to teach you the prayer attitude toward service. For love expresses itself as service. Love grows through service, and love is begun in the womb of service. And God is love. The avatar is a child to the children, a boy to the boys, a man among men, a woman among women, so that the avatar's message might reach each heart and receive enthusiastic response as divine bliss. It is the compassion of the avatar that prompts his every action. Though I am here bodily, still I know what you do. Beyond the 7 seas, go wherever you will. Over the wide world, I am with you. My abode is in your heart, and I am within you. When you see the world with the eye of divine bliss, you will find bliss everywhere. If there is hatred in your vision, you will see hatred everywhere. Hence, change your vision to start with. Look at the world with the vision of peace, love, and compassion. Then the whole world will appear loving and peaceful. When your heart is filled with love, you will experience the divine in the entire cosmos. See the divine in everyone. Eschew hatred and ill will. After years of devotion, many still lack a broad outlook and an all-encompassing love, embodiments of divine love. Promote love in your hearts incessantly. Love that is immortal and infinite. These are the words of Bhagavan Sri Satya Sai Baba. Jai Sai Ram.
Saram, everyone.
Sairam, Sairam. It's very nice. Thank you so much, both of you. Sairam, Brother Aaron and Cosby Powell. On behalf of our Kansas Sai Center, we would like to thank you from bottom of our hearts for sharing such divine glimpses of Swami's divinity. Next will be doing Mahamrityunjay Mantram 3 times for the well-being of everyone. and followed by Mahamangal Harati and Vibhuti prayer. Sairam, everyone.
Oh, I think.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Yeah. Please go ahead, brother. Sairam. ॐ त्र्यम्बकं यजामहे सुगन्धिं पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनान् मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतात् ॐ त्र्यम्बकं यजामहे सुगन्धिं पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनान् मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतात् ॐ त्र्यम्बकं यजामहे सुगन्धिं पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनान् मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ जय जगदीश हरे स्वामी सत्य साई हरे भक्त जना संरक्षक पति महेश्वर ॐ जय जगदीश हरे शशिवदना श्रीकरा सर्वा प्राणपते स्वामी सर्वा प्राणपते आश्रित कल्पलतिका आपद्बान्धव ॐ जय जगदीश हरे माता पिता गुरुदैवमु मर्यन्तयु मीरे स्वामी मर्यन्तयु मीरे नाद ब्रह्म जगन्नाथ नागेन्द्र शयन ॐ जय जगदीश हरे ओंकार रूप ओजस्वी ओ साई महादेव सत्य साई महादेव मंगल हारति अंदुको मंगल हारतुलंदुको मंदर गिरिधारी ओम जय जगदीश हरे नारायण नारायण ओम सत्यनारायण नारायण नारायण ओम नारायण नारायण ओम सत्यनारायण नारायण ओम सत्यनारायण नारायण ओम जय सद्गुरुदेवा साई नारायण नारायण ओम सत्यनारायण नारायण नारायण ओम नारायण नारायण ओम सत्यनारायण नारायण ओम सत्यनारायण नारायण ओम जय सद्गुरुदेवा साई नारायण नारायण ओम सत्यनारायण नारायण नारायण ओम नारायण नारायण ओम सत्यनारायण नारायण ओम सत्यनारायण नारायण ओम जय सद्गुरुदेवा ओम शांति 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 समस्त लोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्त लोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्त लोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु ओम शांति शांति शांति
जय बोलो भगवान श्री सत्य साई बाबा जी की जय परमं पवित्रं बाबा विभूतिं Paramam Vichitram Leela Vibhutim Paramartha Ishtartha Moksha Pradhanam Baba Vibhutim Idamashayami. Sacred, holy, and supreme is Baba's Vibhuti, pouring forth in brilliant streams display of Vibhuti. So auspicious is its might, it grants liberation. Baba's Vibhuti, its power protects us. Paramam Pavitram Baba Vibhutim Paramam Vichitram Leela Vibhutim Paramartha Ishtartha Moksha Pradhanam Baba Vibhutim Idamashayami. Sai Baba Vibhutim Idamashayami.